Hello everyone, and welcome back to Killershrewfan's 12 Days of Reviews. For many people, Christmas and the holiday season are a very nostalgic time of year. We gather with friends and families, reliving old traditions like watching holiday specials, listening to classic Christmas carols, and of course, bake the typical sweets, all while remembering a more innocent time where we waited with bated breath for Santa Claus to visit, hopefully with toys in tow. I know that I sure still hold on to these memories and look back on all of them with a warm fondness around this time of year. But perhaps one of the most nostalgic things I can think of would be watching the old Ray Harryhausen films. There was a point in my life where these movies and their kin were all that I would watch, and I remember filling my Christmas list with requests for DVD copies of some of my favorites. Needless to say, when Rebor revealed they would be producing a retro line of figures inspired by the work of paleo artists like Charles R. Knight, I jumped for joy, as these artistic interpretations had inspired the creatures seen throughout the films I loved throughout my childhood. So far, 2 have been produced, and both are long antiquated interpretations of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Here now before you I have Mesozoic Rhapsody, the Valley variant, which, given its purple tones, is an obvious nod to the Valley of Gwangi, one of my all-time favorite Ray Harryhausen films, as you can see. I am currently holding out on the Californication version until the arcade variant becomes available, but that's okay, because this one here was my priority of the bunch given how it tickles my nostalgia bone. So why don't we go ahead and take a closer look. So starting with the face, you can see that the head of the figure features that iguana-style sculpt work prevalent in Knight's early work, with large round scales on the lower mandible being surrounded by tapering-sized, more angular scale work. The golden eyes are surrounded by smaller, angular scales that form angry brows and bags of skin, and of course this figure does boast extraoral tissue in the form of lizard-like lips. Yeah, Knight was putting lips on dinosaurs before it was cool, you bunch of posers. The jaw is articulated, but unfortunately mine doesn't work all that great. For one thing, the motion is limited, but the joint is also very loose, meaning I can't really close it flush with the mouth and get the full effect of the extraoral tissue. Still, Rebor more than makes up for that with the work on the interior. The detail in here is absolutely insane. The teeth are the semi-translucent plastic, and you can see that the roots feature darker brown areas of rot. I'm also a big fan of the little strand of saliva between the teeth there. Now, whether or not that was intentional or an accidental slop of gloss that quickly dried, I have no idea. But it injects an extra level of realism into the work of the mouth. So that's the head. Wonderfully captures Knight's original aesthetic in an awesome interpretation. Let's go ahead and move on down the body, where you can see the iguana-like dewlap dangling below the lower mandible, and you also have got all these great folds of skin and wrinkles adorning the bunching cords of muscles in that S-curve neck. The skin also forms a lot of great areas of buckling movement at the base of the neck and above the shoulder blades, and you can see how the overall look of the skin work on the torso has a very elephantine quality to it, sagging down around the gut and pulling around the shoulders and away from the body with the bracing legs, almost like a wet, wrinkling paper towel. These skin forms have then been covered with very fine scale work, again showing how Rebor have improved in their approach to rendering soft tissue. It's detailed, yet not simply a repetitive stamp of exaggerated texture. This allows us to better see all of that movement in the skin work, which is great. It isn't as true to Knight's work as the sculpture on the head is. We should be seeing more large statement scales along the flank, but it is just an interpretation at the end of the day, and well done enough to merit comment. This texture continues all the way down the length of the undulating tail. Although Knight's T-Rex never had such squirmy tails, I distinctly remember almost being hypnotized by the way Harryhausen's dinosaurs were constantly waving their tails, and the fact that each frame of movement was done by hand was always so incredible to me to consider. With that in mind, I do appreciate the artistic liberties Rebor took by not giving us a more conservatively straight tail akin to Knight's original painting. As is, it feels like a tribute to Harryhausen's dinosaurs, which is very cool to me. Now, unlike a lot of Rebor's theropods in this size range, range, it is not a bendable wire rubber tail, it's just a static piece, which is a bit disappointing I must say, but at least they posed it in that aesthetically fitting manner. Anyway, you can see some nice muscle tones at the base of the tail, flexing with the movement, and an interesting addition I'm seeing are these spikes that run across the back of the tip. This isn't something I've seen in Knight's work, and I'm sure it's just Rebor adding some quote-unquote visual flair, but I don't know. If it were me, I'd just as soon as left those off or done something a little more in line with Harryhausen's designs. As is, they're just very unnecessary in my eyes. The front arms of the figure are nice and short and feature some prominent muscle tones along with the misguided third digit Knight originally reconstructed his Rex with before an actual arm was found. The claws are a jet black color, and the arms do articulate at the shoulder, allowing you a slight range of motion that doesn't really add much to the figure in my opinion. But you can do the "why though" pose, which is always great. The legs are nice and powerful looking, with robust musculature in the thighs and calves, and I appreciate the buckling skin around the kneecaps on both sides. The feet have a very bird-like feel to them, with the fourth inner digit being moved down to behind the ankle and forming another weight-bearing digit. This gives the reconstruction's feet a very bird-of-prey look, and whereas it is outdated, it makes for an interesting interpretation that unwittingly links these guys to birds far earlier than we ever caught on. If you move along the underbelly, you can see areas where the skin sags and gathers in the gullet before bunching up above the prominent pectorals. The belly itself then has more linear striations that grow in space the further you move down the tail. The creature is posed mid-stride in that kangaroo posture, although it is not a tripod interestingly enough. The front heavy weight of it keeps the tail lifted off the ground, while the backside is sturdy enough to keep it from tumbling head over heels. So a very well-balanced sculpt here as the creature cranes its head over its right shoulder. And that was the sculpt of this thing. Overall, I think this is another piece that shows Rebor improving as artists. I don't know if it's as impressive as their Carnotaurus from earlier this year, but like that figure, it shows them striking a good balance with their detail work. It's noticeable, but doesn't smother the rest of the figure. Something else I should mention is that the figure does come in two different pieces like many of Rebor's offerings. You have the tail and the whole darn thing, and installing it is just a matter of just really forcing the tail into the slot and realizing you need to use some of your dino funds for a gym membership. Now the paintwork is potentially the greatest letdown here, as it is not nearly as saturated as advertised, which does strip it of some visual interest. It's still purple, but more of a desaturated gray purple that transitions to a dirty cream underbelly. It's certainly less vibrant than the tones we see on Guanji, and the colors that were advertised on the Paintmaster. I really don't know what happened or what informed Rebor's decision to walk back the saturation of purple, but it is something I am sorely missing on the final figure. When it comes to its size, I must say I was surprised how large this thing is. A straight measurement will get you around 13 inches or 33 centimeters, but if you snake along the curve, it's actually closer to 16 inches long or 40.5 centimeters. It then stands an impressive 7 3/4 inches off the ground or around 19.5 centimeters in that kangaroo posture. So yeah, it's a sizable figure. For size comparison, I'll start off by bringing in the recently reviewed Carnotaurus Rex, still one of Rebor's best ever in my eyes. Anyway, you can see that Guanji there may not have the bulk of the Carno, but it does easily beat it in height. That being said, both of these figures mark a high point on Rebor's part if you ask me, and I really appreciate that they gave us two icons from my childhood in 1 year. Next up, here it is with their JP Tyrannosaurus Rex, aka Killer Queen. Not a bad figure, but you can definitely see how their scale work was a bit overbearing back then and how their techniques have evolved. Then we have the V-Rex, aka Vanilla Ice, another beefy, beautiful beast from the company. And as a final comparison, this one's kind of fun. I brought in iconic restorations of Tyrannosaurus Rex throughout the years, with Guanji here being our earliest interpretation and PNSO's Wilson being our most up-to-date. I'm sure I've got a few missing links in there, Californication being an obvious one, but this makes for a really fun display and one that I would love to flesh out with future editions. It's always cool to me to see how our understanding of these animals has changed throughout the decades, and it doesn't get much more night and day than this. See what I did there? Oh, and for a more general size comparison, there it is with your standard DVD. That's fun, right? And that was Rebor's Charles R. Knight Tyrannosaurus Rex, aka Mesozoic Rhapsody. Overall, this is another win for the company, showing market improvement over their previous results while also drilling into a largely untapped area of the market. Vintage dinosaur models would make such a cool addition to any shelf, and with companies like PNSO dominating scientifically accurate offerings while Nanmu seems to have taken over the JP knockoff niche, it's refreshing to see Rebor exploring new avenues that still allow them to stay relevant in a saturated market. As far as this figure goes, I definitely dig it and cannot wait for the others in this line. As always though, I want to know what you guys think of this model. Do you own it yet? Are you planning to pick it up? And what other vintage dinosaur interpretations would you like to see Rebor do next? I don't know about you, but I'd personally love to see some Crystal Palace Park dinos. Drop a comment down below, and as always, thank you so much for tuning in to today's review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again tomorrow when I go on safari. For now, though, I think I'm gonna go watch some Harryhausen movies. It's that time of year again, after all.